I am a Vietnam veteran, a Vietnam era veteran, only by a few weeks actually. I enlisted in 1975 and I served for 6 years. I was a radioman, and I was stationed in Iceland, Greece, and Norfolk, Virginia. As a radioman, military, it was not really what I had planned. But when I think back on it, it was where I needed to be. My mother comes from a very large family. She's the youngest of 11 children. And 5 of her brothers all served in the military. Unfortunately, only one of them was smart enough to go into the Navy. The rest of them were all in the Army, and with the exception of one, they all served during World War II. They all left for World War II together, and they made a promise that they would meet in Philadelphia and come home together. And they did. The one thing that drew me to VVA was I was at a mall. I was shopping, and I'm walking through this mall. I had a Navy shirt on, and this old woman, who at that point was old, I'm now older than she was then, she came running down the mall after me, and she said, "Are you Navy? Are you Navy?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "My husband was Navy. He was killed in Vietnam." And she started talking to me, and she said, "My VVA chapter has a table set up. Come on over and talk to us." So I went over and I talked to him, and I thought, this woman's nuts. And because I had never even considered myself a veteran, I just didn't even think about it. I just knew that I spent 6 years in the Navy, and that was it. But Betty Bixler, I'll never forget her. She took me over to the chapter table, and she looked at this one guy, and she said, "Sign her up, I'll pay." So she paid for my first year's membership, and I went to my first meeting, and it was like I sat in the back of the room because I thought, I really don't belong here. I'm not a Vietnam veteran. And that's when I realized I was a Vietnam era veteran. And it was the first time, it's been brought to my attention since then. This is the first era of veterans that have been classified as era veterans. There's no such thing as a World War II era veteran, or there's no such thing now as an Iraq era veteran. A veteran is a veteran, and I just happened to fit in with the time period of the Vietnam veteran. It's been a ride. I joined in 1989 or 1990, I'm not really sure. It's been a while ago, and one of the first people I met was this woman who was like crazy. I kept hearing this woman's name, and I kept thinking, who is she? Because everybody kept saying we'd go to meetings, and we had this old Korean vet who was our women veterans chair, and he did a nice job, but every time he'd get up, he'd start reading his report, and he'd go, "Marcia Ford says, yeah, and Marcia Ford," and I kept thinking, who the hell is Marcia Ford? And then I met her, and that was kind of a turning point, because I realized that there were things out there I could do. I wasn't a nurse. I couldn't do a Band-Aid. I mean, quite frankly, my family teases me all the time because if I get a bloody nose, I pass out. So I'm not a nurse in any way, and I thought, what can I do to help anybody? And Marcia kind of hooked me up with homeless veterans. And that was in 1994. I was about 7 years old. No, no, she hooked me up with that, and I went to my first stand down, and it was like, this is so cool. It's sad that the two words homeless and veteran should be used in the same breath. But to know that there were people out there who were doing what they could to help these people was just so cool. So I quit my job at Lucent Technologies in 1990. Well, I actually told my boss in 1996, I'm leaving. And he said, well, nobody leaves Lucent Technologies or AT&T. And I said, well, I am. And this is a guy who, when he became my boss, I kind of told him, get out of my office. My shoes are older than you are. His dad was a Vietnam vet. And he teased me all the time. He said, you're really not leaving me, are you? And this was going on for the latter part of 1996. And then 1997 started, and he said, you're really not leaving me, are you? I said, well, I'm actually staying for my birthday because you owe me. So in May of 1997, I left Lucent Technologies and went to work for the Philadelphia Veterans Multi-Service Center as a coordinator for their homeless veterans program that Marcia Four had started. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I have no letters after my name. To this day, I have no letters after my name. I have no professional background in dealing with anything. I tease my veterans all the time that the only letters I have after my name are MOM, because most of them called me Mom. Even the old guys, the 96-year-old guy I talked about at my session today, he even called me Mom, which really made me feel bad. But, you know, we opened this program, and when we walked in, it was like, it was an empty building. All the beds were in the rooms, but the lockers were all somewhere else, and tables were somewhere else. And we spent the better part of a month moving every piece of furniture. Knowing Marcia, if anybody knows her, she knows that you didn't move furniture once. You moved it 3 or 4 times.
You gotta get in just the right spot.
It has to be just perfect. And then, you know, when we were told we were going to open this house, I still kept thinking, oh, I'm going to do this for a couple of years, maybe 4 or 5 years, and then I'm outie. That was 21 years ago. But we were told on Friday the 13th, June 13th, oh, by the way, you open on Monday. So, and Marcia and I had already spent a month there with just setting everything up. We had no computer. We really had no phones. We had beepers, pagers, but we had no phones. We had no policies. And we sat outside on a swing writing policy. Each day we would write something new. And when it finally came time for us to open, I don't really know who was more nervous, us or them. Because when these guys got off the elevator, they looked like they were deer in headlights. And I'm sure we looked the same to them. But, you know, we realized that this was, I mean, I realized, and I think Marcia did too, this is where I needed to be. I could do something. I could change people's lives. And I always said, if I can retire and have changed one person's life, it's worth it. I retired a month ago, and I've changed 3,000 lives. And it doesn't get much better.
So let's talk a little bit about how things have changed, but in many ways still have stayed the same as far as homeless veterans
Oh, well, you know, we as Vietnam veterans are still the largest population. The reason for the homelessness is still the same. Drugs, alcohol, abuse, neglect, failure, you name it. The reasons are still the same. The programs have changed, but the veterans haven't. It's still the same program. It's still the same population, and it's still the same feeling. It's just how you have to do things is a little different. I'm not a numbers person. I don't like numbers, and I made that very clear from the very beginning. I'm not about the numbers. I'm about that person sitting across the desk from me. I'm about that veteran. I don't really care if my numbers show that I had X number of relapses or whatever amongst my veterans. What mattered to me was How did I help that man or woman pick up and carry on, start over? It was about the person, and it's still about the person. It, the VA has turned more now towards everything is based on numbers. When we started, a success was someone who came into your program and left your program clean and sober. The difference now is they come into your program, they can get stoned out of their mind, they can do whatever they want to do, and as long as you find them somewhere to live, that's a good discharge. And that's, to me, I'm not so sure I'm all about that. Because you can give anybody a house or anybody an apartment, but it's how have you helped change that person's life. We had a veteran we placed in an apartment right off the street through Shelter Plus Care, and he didn't know how to live. He did not know how to live in an apartment. Had he come to a program like we had, we would have been able to teach him how to start over, how to shower every day. We've had veterans in Philadelphia have started fires in their apartments because they don't know any other way to keep warm. They've burnt, there was a man about 5 years ago. You know, they just don't know how to survive, and they can't get into programs like we ran because they had maybe bad paper or they were an OTH discharge, because Grant Per Diem up until last year only took those individuals who had a general or honorable discharge. They have now changed that, which has been a positive change for those individuals who have the OTH discharges.
Any closing comments?
We will never end veteran homelessness, but what we need to end is the stigma that we as Vietnam Veterans of America, that we have tried to erase. Just because an individual is homeless does not mean they're helpless. And our job as a veteran service organization has always been to help our brothers and sisters. That's what we are for. That's what we're about.